Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever stood up there in a room absolutely pouring your heart into a presentation, only to watch half the audience just subtly pull out their phones? Yeah, we've all been there, and it's a uniquely painful experience, right? But what if the problem isn't your material at all? What if the problem is that you're just speaking the completely wrong language? Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be breaking down a really fascinating piece of source material that outlines a totally unique public speaking module. It's called the Neuropsychology Way. We'll explore the exact claims this module makes about how to genuinely connect with an audience. And listen, we aren't talking about standard stagecraft here. We're talking about leveraging the hard science of how our brains actually process information to literally hold a room's attention hostage.
Can public speaking be hypnotic? Think about that word for just a second, hypnotic. I know, when we hear that, we usually picture a swinging pocket watch or, someone clucking like a chicken on stage, but the material we're analyzing today uses the term entirely differently. It describes a state of deep, unbreakable cognitive engagement. It suggests that if you take the right approach, bypassing the audience's critical filters and achieving rapt attention isn't just a happy accident, it's actually a structural guarantee. It's a pretty bold claim for sure. We're not just talking about keeping people awake with a few well-timed jokes or suddenly raising the volume of your voice. We're exploring a framework that claims to capture an audience's attention so completely, they basically have no choice but to absorb your message. So how exactly does this module pull off such an intense, almost involuntary resonance?
Section 1, the Neuropsychology Way and Language for the Brain. This is where we get into our first major concept, showing how this definitely isn't your standard public speaking training, but rather a highly specific, practical module.
The source explicitly outlines that this is far from your run-of-the-mill speaking workshop. You won't find any of that tired advice here about keeping your hands out of your pockets or imagining the audience in their underwear to calm your nerves. Instead, participants learn the core fundamentals of what the module calls language for the brain. Basically, it breaks down complex ideas into a highly structured language designed specifically for human cognition. It implies that our brains have their own hardwired set of codes and preferences for taking in data. Here's a kind of surprising fact. Our brains are actually incredibly lazy. They eat up a massive amount of our body's energy, so they're constantly hunting for cognitive shortcuts to save power. When you just list off raw facts, the brain has to work super hard to categorize them, and that creates serious cognitive friction. This language for the brain approach, it relies on using heuristic shortcuts, emotional triggers, and specific narrative structures that our brains naturally crave. It's all about packaging your ideas into a format that the mind can just absorb effortlessly, slipping right past those natural, energy-saving filters.
Section 2. Hypnotizing your audience. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we shift from basic communication theory right into the core mechanism of extreme influence and the types of messages used.
The source states that participants would, and I quote, know what type of message would be able to hypnotize the audience and have a huge impact on the audience. Notice the deliberate, heavy weight of that promise there. By identifying the absolute correct type of message, you completely bypass typical audience resistance. Now, what does cognitive resistance actually look like in the real world? Well, it's those crossed arms in the boardroom, right? The skeptical frown, that internal voice of the listener going, yeah, I've heard this all before. The source argues that specific, high-impact message types act almost like a skeleton key. They lower those physical and mental defenses by speaking directly to the older, more emotionally driven parts of our brain. It entirely bypasses that critical, over-analytical prefrontal cortex that just wants to sit there and argue with you. It's really about engineering a profound impact that borders on a waking trance.
Let's visualize the contrast the source sets up here. Think about standard public speaking. It often feels a bit like throwing raw data at a brick wall, doesn't it? I mean, it's informative, sure, but it bounces right off the audience's mental barriers and usually gets forgotten the exact moment they walk out the door. The Neuropsychology Way, however, is much more like tuning a radio to the exact right frequency. Instead of hitting a wall, the message slips seamlessly through the static and resonates deeply within the listener's mind. So we have to contrast standard speaking with this new framework. The module aims to completely overhaul the very foundation of how messages are chosen and crafted. It fundamentally shifts your goal as a speaker from just transmitting information to actively architecting a high-impact neurological event for your listener.
Section 3. The Practical Application. This is where we put the theory to work and see how it becomes reality.
Let's move to and see how this builds. According to the text, participants take a very clear, logical three-step journey. Step 1. You learn those underlying fundamentals of brain language we discussed, really understanding those energy-saving cognitive shortcuts. Step 2.
You use that foundation to know the specific hypnotic message types. And finally, step 3, the practical session application. Imagine a hypothetical executive going through this exact pipeline. In step 1, she learns the brain's deep preference for stark contrast over raw data. In step 2, she crafts a specific hypnotic message. So maybe she uses a vivid before and after scenario instead of reading off a boring bulleted list of product features. And then in step 3, she stands up and actually delivers it in the room. It's a perfectly linear flow from understanding the biology of the brain, to crafting the precise message, to actually executing the whole shebang.
The practical session to use neuropsychology. Why is this practical session emphasized so heavily in the source material? Well, because neurologically speaking, passive learning just isn't enough. The goal of the module isn't to just leave you with a notebook full of interesting cognitive theories. No way. To truly master the language for the brain, the speaker's own brain has to build entirely new neural pathways through actual physical practice. Look, you can't learn to ride a bicycle just by reading a book about the physics of it, right? And you definitely can't master the neuropsychology way just by listening to a lecture. You actually have to speak it aloud. The text guarantees a practical session where individuals are actively equipped to rewire their own habits and put these tools into practice right then and there.
Are your messages speaking directly to the brain? Based on the source material we've broken down in this explainer today, if you aren't purposefully using the fundamentals of brain language, you might be missing out on that massive, hypnotic impact you're entirely capable of creating. It completely changes how we think about stepping up to a microphone. So take a moment to evaluate your own next presentation. Are you delivering raw data that's just causing cognitive friction? Or are you crafting a message that slips perfectly into the mind of your listener? Because if you aren't speaking the brain's language, who or what are you actually talking to?